Good evening, everyone. Tonight is July 26, 2023. Welcome to the Columbus City Council meeting for this evening. Our first order of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would someone like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda for tonight's meeting?
So this is Janet. I move to approve consent agendas items 3 through 5.
And a
Sue, I'll
second?
second.
I'll call for the vote. Rob, I'll start this way tonight.
So question, if I wasn't at the meeting, should I vote on it or
Probably not.
probably not? Abstain?
Right.
Thank you.
All right, John
Janet, aye.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
and Jesse, aye. Moving quickly on to letter C. Is there anyone here who, or online, who would like to speak on public open forum? Hearing none, we'll move on to Planning Commission report, and I believe, Sue, you're the new liaison for the next month or two.
Yes, I am.
All right.
Okay, so we had a few items. It was a long meeting. The first item is we had a public hearing for Thomas Vacha at 18760 Jennings Street for a variance to reduce an accessory structure setback by 18 inches. Frank reviewed the findings and recommendations. He said that it was in alignment with the zoning ordinance, the comprehensive plan, and was consistent with the character of the neighborhood. Also, two of the Planning Commission members went to Mr. Vacha's site to view the property and see if any neighbors had issues with it, and they didn't have any issues. Mr. Vacha appreciated that they came out to his place, and the Planning Commission made the recommendation to the City Council to approve the variance. So, Elizabeth, you mentioned that maybe, so is there any questions, first of all? And I know Mr. Vacha is not here, unless is there anybody online?
He is not online. Mr. Mayor and council members, at the Planning Commission, the report was in draft form, and since then, City Attorney Jake Steen did review the variance and updated language, and before you, you have the updated report, or variance report. There's only one change at the very top. Instead of July 14th, the date should be changed to July 25th, because that's the last day that edits and changes were made. My understanding is that Mr. Vacha was contacted this morning. Whether or not there was contact, I don't know, because I asked staff to make sure that there was a paper copy for Mr. Vacha to pick up and review, and to remind him about the council meeting. So, but he is not here this evening, and I know that I talked to council member, and there was some question in the report, because he does talk about a utility storage building. And I did ask Frank at the time when he wrote that, why he put that language in there. And he had indicated that was the language on the application. So I think in the motions, I did add a condition indicating that there is a possibility of adding a number 3 condition stating the accessory building is for residential use only. Unfortunately, we can't ask the applicant, because he's not here, what he intended to use the building for. But we generally don't have utility storage building, is not usually the language, but maybe that meant something to him.
Yeah.
So do we make the motion the way it stands, or do we wait until we get clarification on that language?
It's really up to you. You've got a pending application with conditions drafted, so you could adopt it, and then if they want a modification, they'd have to bring it back, or you could hold it over if you're not at the end of the 60-day time limit.
So this is Janet. I mean, I raised the question because on the application, he had circled residential use, but then he had listed materials, vehicles, equipment, a whole bunch of stuff that didn't seem like residential use, and then it was unclear in his report. So I was hoping he'd be here so we could ask him the question, but maybe since he circled residential use on the application, I feel pretty good about just including that as the motion, and if that's not the case, he can come back and we can change it, I guess. Oh, good.
Planning on putting, because he's got a large mobile home that he's been parking in, a couple trailers that guys use for hauling things, because you can't leave your tools and stuff out anymore. And I asked him specifically if he was going to be using it for business or anything, he said no, he sold his business.
Oh, great, okay. Perfect.
Oh, thank you.
Then I feel even better about that. Thanks, Barb.
Okay. So
Mr. Mayor and council, why don't you repeat that since it wasn't at the microphone, so it's clear in the record, the
you-
clarification you got?
Would you approach the microphone,
Barb.
please?
please approach the microphone.
Pull it in close so we can hear.
And to give your
Please speak into the microphone.
This is Barb Bobick. I did go out and see Mr. Vacha's property, and both Lynn and I did at different times, and he does have a couple of the trailers that contractors generally use to put their tools and stuff in, locked trailers. I think they're 5 foot or something like that. And he does have a mobile home that he plans on putting in there, so he's going to have an enlarged door because a regular door wouldn't work. So I asked him if, I said, I understand you're a businessman, a contractor, and he said, I owned a business in Lino Lakes repairing vehicles. And I said, well, do you intend to do that kind of work here, or, you know, now that you're retired? And he said, absolutely not. He said he sold his business. So it's just for his own stuff that he's got. So that's all I have for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was that
Okay,
the motion?
yes, so I move to approve a variance request at 18760 Jennings Street for front yard setback from 75 feet to 73.4 feet based on findings 1 through 6, subject to conditions 1 through 2, as stated in the staff report dated 7/25/2023, adding number 3, conditions stating that the accessory building is for residential use only.
I'll second the motion. Are there any other questions or any discussion anyone would like to have? I'll call for the vote.
Rob, aye?
Janet, I.
Sue, I.
Ron, aye.
And Jesse, aye.
Okay, the next item we talked about was the public hearing for, and discussion on ordinance 23-027A, commercial design standards. Dean Johnson reviewed at a high level because we've reviewed these on multiple occasions. He just did a high level, and he said that it became clear a while back that the Freeway District should be different than the Lake Drive District. He said that originally the changes were going to be more instructive about colors, more detail, and that type of thing. But a couple meetings ago, you know, we decided to go the other direction and make it more general. And so some of the things that we decided on are colors should be softer, neutral colors, with brilliant neon and other distracting colors will be prohibited. We changed the minimum square footage of any building on properties greater than or equal to 1 acre. Those have to be at least 7% of the property acreage, including wetlands and other easements and things. Building materials masonry was added to stucco, and being removed or not permitted is standing seam, ribbed, or corrugated metal panels. Some percentage of facade of buildings was updated. Fencing issues clarification with corrugated metal or plastic fencing is now prohibited. Then Elizabeth had asked for clarification on which way the finished side of the fence should be. So we had a good discussion about that, and everybody agreed that the finished side or the nice side should be facing your neighbor or whatever the public right-of-way is. And then the last change was for the lighting. They just added intensity of illumination greater than 1/2 candle, foot candle, blah, 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 and all of that. So after this discussion was complete, the commissioners voted to recommend that the city council accept the changes as stated in our packet tonight. Is there any questions on that ordinance?
I actually
Design
have,
standards.
yeah, I have two questions, actually. One is, excuse me, so I'm looking at page 2 of 12 or 17, depending on what number you look at, and it's under number 5. So it says multiple color schemes are permitted, provided they are complementary and compatible, and then the rest of the sentence is crossed off, but I thought compatible with what? So I wondered whether we wanted to add the softer neutral color scheme. And then as I walked through this, I saw that in the next section, under the mixed use, the primary, under the same number 5, the primary masonry exterior wasn't crossed off. So I'm thinking that might have just been an error. And so my question is, do we want to just say that the multiple color schemes are permitted provided they are complementary and compatible with the neutral, softer neutral color scheme? And then that can carry through in all of the same sections for this ordinance. Otherwise, it just seems like it's funny that it says compatible, but it doesn't say with what.
Yeah, I see where that is. I would
Mr.
be-
Mayor, yeah, Mr. Mayor and Council, I would just say, yeah, that could have been a typo. Those are two different ideas, though, right? One is compatibility with the masonry exterior, right? And the other is with the neutral color scheme. So to me, there's a policy choice, which way you're going. Are you going with the original language and you just bring back the stricken language with the primarily masonry exterior, or as Councilmember Hegland suggesting, with the neutral color scheme? Because to me, those are two different ideas.
I think that the reason that primarily with the masonry exterior was crossed off is because we reduced the percentage required. So when it was the majority, it made sense to say it needed to, but now it's 50% or less depending on what district you're in. So I think the crossing out makes sense, but then I feel like you need to replace it with something else.
So what would the way it is in the first one where it is crossed off, it says multiple color schemes are permitted, provided they are complementary and compatible.
And then I would say with the softer neutral colors, the overall softer neutral color scheme.
And I would be okay with that, but I think it actually makes sense without, because everything has to be complementary and compatible. It would be with both, in my opinion.
Mr. Mayor and Council, you can read it that way. I mean, just leave the language out, and it's consistent, internally consistent with the other colors within the scheme. So it doesn't require clarification, because I think you can read it as Councilmember Wagman said. Obviously, you can provide the clarification that is suggested as well.
What do you think? What do you think?
I think because of the amount of discussion we've had about colors and whether it should be neutral or all those different iterations, it felt more complete to reference back to that, since that's kind of where we landed. But I see what you're saying too, so, I mean, I can live with either one.
Well, we've been going back and forth enough with this one. I think one more time, just getting clarification, and I don't know who we would get clarification with, Dean or the Planning Commission, to make sure that we're all on the same page with, or if we can just make that decision right now, I'm fine with that too.
Mr. Mayor and Council, it's a small enough tweak that I'm comfortable the council can make that tweak because it's clarifying what's written there. I don't know that it's intended to change the direction. It was helpful to hear the reason why you struck with the primarily masonry exterior.
Rob?
Are we moving on from that one? It's
Well,
a
do you
different.
have an opinion to leave it, to have it in or leave it out on all of them?
I don't, yeah.
I'm the same. I think it stay in or leave it.
What do you think, Mr. Mayor?
I have no opinion.
Okay.
Well, can I just, can I just add one comment? Multiple color schemes are permitted, provided they are complementary and compatible with the multiple colors. I mean, the sentence starts with what they're compatible with. So I'm not sure that there's anything lacking there. Just as I read it over and over, multiple color schemes are permitted, provided they are complementary and compatible with each other, the multiple color schemes. So.
I just was thinking, like I said, the amount of discussion we had, and if you have some accent colors that aren't necessarily neutral, and 50% of the building is comprised of that, are we going to have anybody who's going to have a problem if half of the building is neutral soft and the other half is more bold colors? I mean, I know that we've beaten this horse to death, but I just thought, since it's obvious on the next page that it didn't get crossed off, so at minimum, we need to make it consistent throughout. To bring up whether or not we wanted to be clearer on the preference towards soft or neutral color schemes without, mandating a specific color palette, which this does.
And it was crossed off in every other section except for that one.
Correct.
So the typo is not crossing it out.
If nobody cares,
Well,
leave it the way it is and just fix the one that's on page 18. So
I think that's I would recommend it because it's leaving it more open, and I think that's the direction we were going in. If you say with the softer neutral colors, what if the masonry isn't a soft neutral color? It's not going to be bright, it's not going to be neon, but it might not be soft and neutral. Then it wouldn't be compatible. We wouldn't be saying it wouldn't be compatible with that.
Well, that would be a problem because we have a colors shall, which means it has to be soft or neutral colors. So if the masonry, which is 50% or more, isn't, that would be a problem. But it's okay. Let's just leave it. Let's just fix the typo and then we can
Fix the
move on.
typo, okay.
So are you saying that in section 5, that the crossout should stay in? The use of contracting yet harmonious colors may also be permitted, provided they're compatible?
I'm saying it can be right in every section except on page 18. They didn't cross it off. So you would cross that off to make each of the
Yeah, only,
districts say the same thing.
Right, the very next page,
Yep.
it's left in, it's just a typo, it wasn't crossed
with
out.
Okay.
primarily masonry exterior.
And then my second question is, and this is just a clarification for me, so in the G where it says properties greater than or equal to 1 acre minimum square footage, so if you have a property that's less than 1 acre, it's totally up to the discretion of the council. Am I getting that right? I'm thinking of our friends at Caribou, which is on 3/4 of an acre. There would not be that 7% requirement if it was
Right.
less than.
That's
okay.
how you would read it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that. Then I'm cool.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, so this is Rob. So it's on page 18, section D, or D. It says pitch roofs shall be exposed and shall be constructed of a commercial-grade architectural shingle. I was hoping that we could possibly insert asphalt shingle in there because there's nothing stating that asphalt shingle would be acceptable. It just says architectural. Is that a big deal, Bill, or?
Well, it's only a big deal if the intent was to leave it out. So I don't know in those discussions if.
I mean,
by-
would the
What
rest of
page-
the council interpret an architectural feature as, you know, an asphalt shingle like would be on a house? I mean, there's some that are 40-year, you know.
What page are you on again? Sorry.
18, so it's page 2 of 12, it says at the bottom.
Okay.
Under the public hearing. And then D, it's towards the bottom. And it kind of leads into where I was gonna go with, we accept standing seam roofing there. So I was wondering if we could include it in 22, under C, it says standing seam or rib corrugated metals are not permitted. If we could just eliminate standing seam and put ribbed or corrugated metals.
So you weren't there at the meeting that we discussed this at?
Sure.
And I brought it up kind of on your behalf, and
Appreciate that.
Dean he didn't think there was, he didn't understand what you were talking about, and he didn't get any examples, so he wanted to leave it out.
Okay.
So I just know that we brought it up, because I know you brought it up.
Yeah, I mean,
But
it's an attractive building feature, really. They kind of use it to break up, you know, buildings, but if we want to leave it out, that's fine. I'm happy to see it's accepted on the roofs because that's what Caribou Coffee has it on, is on their roof, but,
I think a standing seam roof is different than corrugated metal on the,
yeah,
on
so
the
those
side.
standing seam roof, they'll use that on walls now as well. To break up. You see it all over the cities. So if it's a census of the council, like to see it excluded. And then just, you know, ribbed or corrugated is more like your barn metals, you know.
So you're saying you want it excluded, but it says that they're not permitted. So you want to eliminate it, that it's
I
not permitted?
want it to be permitted for
Okay.
exteriors, you know, walls. But I'm not gonna die on the hill over it, but, you know.
I have no opinion whatsoever on that.
I think the corrugated metal is the cheapest building you can build, and I think we said that was what we didn't want in that district, because you have corrugated metal in the CI district. So I think we eliminated the corrugated metal in the freeway district, because we wanted at least to have, if we're gonna have metal buildings, we want them to take one step up than
Yeah,
corrugated metal.
and I agree with the corrugated portion about eliminating that. So it's,
I think the confusion came out is he didn't see a distinction between standing seam and corrugated metal. He said it will all look like a pole barn.
oh,
And that's what you don't want. And again, I'm just telling you what the discussion was. This is all above my pay grade. So I feel like if you wanted to make that change, we should get him back in the, Dean back in the mix again, because he had pretty strong opinions about this.
I would be,
And I don't have any strong opinions, because I don't know the
Yeah.
difference between them all.
I mean, I don't want to cost the city more money over it and things like that, but if you know, a corporate client, say, comes with it and it's part of their building makeup and they want to see it on their building, and we're saying, no, that might turn them away from us, right?
It could, but we also have a process to vary that if it's really important to the
Like a variance.
variance or a plan unit development, which we've used in the freeway district.
I don't know that even get caught because nobody knows what it is anyways, so.
I would like, I mean, I don't mind having that discussion with Dean again, and I mean, this, we have been working on this for a long time. I think we should get it right. It's more important to get it right.
I wholeheartedly think we've came a far way on this from where it was when I first got on council and like the masonry and things like that. So if it means us getting it done tonight, I'm fine with just, it is what it is. But if we
Well,
can make a motion here to move forward with it, you know.
I do value your opinion, though, because I know that you're in the industry, and I have no
Thank you.
idea. So,
Mr. Mayor and Council, and I can propose that you go ahead and, set this for hearing. It doesn't have to be, every word doesn't have to be
This is
exact.
adoption.
Oh, this is adoption.
The hearing already
Oh.
took place.
Okay, in that case, you need to clarify it before you publish.
okay.
I thought you were setting it for hearing.
Okay, so then we will bring it back to Dean for one more discussion point.
Let's just leave it alone.
What he would want is, he wants to see the examples you were giving, because he didn't
Sure,
know of any
sure.
examples that wouldn't make it look like a pole barn. And that's why he was saying, I don't think we should accept that. And I think if he had examples that you would show that didn't, he might reconsider that, but he couldn't.
Sure, he
come up-
couldn't visualize it, I get it, so. But I don't want to hold the thing up either. It's been 4 years, 3 years.
And a
I'm
couple.
totally fine with waiting 2 more weeks.
If you're good with it,
I
I'm,
would rather wait and
Okay.
make sure that we're all on the same page.
sounds fair.
Okay.
Thanks for hearing me out on that.
I have a question. Maybe Bill can answer this. The fencing, okay. So the neighbors get to look at the nice side of the fence, correct? The way it's written? So if I've got 10 acres and there's not a house on the left and there's not a house on the right, there's not one in the back, and I have a swimming pool and I put a fence up, I get to look at the ugly side.
Well, unless you buy a fence that doesn't have an ugly side.
Right?
Well, not
Why would
that-
you need a fence?
Well, not that we're going to enforce it, but is there any, I mean, are we talking about a fence that's right on the property line? Or are we talking about fences, whatever? You have a fence in your yard, you got to expose the good side to everybody. That's the way it's written, right?
Yeah, and that's how you usually see that fences constructed. I think of the one that my neighbors constructed in our backyard, and the nice side was facing us, and I appreciated that. But to your point, council member, if somebody makes the case that nobody's affected by this fence, then again, we've got a variance process. So we're setting a general standard, and then in the case of, people want to vary it for some reason, I have no neighbors, I'll never have neighbors because there's a wetland, or there's this, or there's a hill, or whatever. Well, maybe that's an opportunity to flip the fence around. But most fences are intended to be good neighbors, and so you show the pretty side to your neighbors.
Okay.
What would be the exception language if you did put in exception language? Except if your neighbor is more than 500 feet away, or, I mean, like, what would you write?
Well, you unless there's unique circumstances wherein a neighbor is not affected by the fencing, they can't see it, it's below a hill, it's, heavily wooded area, it's, across a wetland. I just think it's such a rare circumstance, Councilmember, that we'll be writing something into the ordinance for the exceptional circumstance, rather than waiting to see if someone really cares.
I'll go along with the variance. I just look, we're in a rural area. We're not in Apple Valley or Bloomington where you got lots right next to you. I understand that part. I just think.
In some cases, our PUD operates in the residential area to have closer neighbors. You've been through some of those newer subdivisions where people are closer. So if the council wants to build in an exception, we can do that, or you can see if the unique case comes up. I mean, one of the things we always say in kind of variance experience or law or practice is if you're granting multiple variances for the same thing, then you write in the exception. But if nobody's coming to you to vary it, then there's, probably not an issue.
Well, we could go that way, or if nobody's looking at it, they're not going to complain. So you can put the good side to your side, and nobody's complaining, we'll never know about it, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. Answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we decided to table, right, and have one more discussion with Dean. Do I need to make a motion for that?
Yes, because it's on the agenda for adoption, you should.
Okay. So I make the motion to table ordinance 23-02, amending Chapter 7A zoning performance standards and housekeeping in the Columbus City Code. Table it to discuss with Dean. What is that called? Can you remind?
Standing seam.
Standing seam.
And you'll be able to show them some examples?
Yeah, I was just trying to look someone to show you, but,
Okay, and we will have examples to discuss.
yep.
And
I'll
Mr. Mayor,
second the motion.
sorry.
Is there any other questions or discussion?
just a clarification, I think what we're talking about is a specific application as an exterior building material rather than a roof material.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Because it's already approved in the roofing aspect.
Okay.
yep.
I'll call for the vote.
Rob, aye?
Janet, I.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
Jesse, aye.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor and council members, for the record, Mr. Vacha apologized. He was a little late to the meeting. He accepted your number 3 condition, and he thanks you for granting his variance.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yay.
All right.
All right, then the last item that we talked about at the meeting was the Chapter 7A of our ordinance, swimming pool fencing requirements. So Frank had reviewed the history of our discussions, and the reason that we're reviewing the swimming pool fence requirements is because there were residents that were questioning, it's at 5 feet, and they thought it should be at 4 feet on above-ground pools only. And so I tried to summarize the pages and pages and pages of information on what we discussed on this ordinance. And I thought, nah, well, then I gave up, and I decided to just read some of the things that, what's in our packet. So, let's see, I was just going to kind of read the last page that had some, so after discussing pool barriers, because we did decide that there is a, we did do changed our ordinance on pool covers, but that was only for in-ground pools. And one of the discussion points that Commissioner Bobick had brought up, that she felt that covers for above-ground pools should be included also. But we did add separate definitions for in-ground and above-ground swimming pools. We revised the description of swimming pool in the introduction of section 7A 807. We added separate requirements for in-ground pools with a cover, above-ground pools, and above-ground pools with a deck. We added the statute that referenced, the Minnesota statute that referenced regarding pool cover requirements, and a lock with a key are required, and the cover must be closed when the pool is unattended. We also added ordinance language, so above-ground pools are not required to be fenced if they are higher than 4 feet, but must have removable steps, and the steps must be removed when the pool is unattended. Above-ground pools with surrounding decks must also feature a 3-foot guardrail or fence. And then we considered whether a rule should be included that requires any gate for fences or guardrails for any pool must include a self-closing and self-latching device that's inaccessible to children. So at the end of the discussion, there really wasn't a recommendation because there wasn't a unanimous vote from the commissioners to recommend for us to approve the ordinance, the changes that were made. So it's not going to go back and forth anymore. It's up to us to make that determination if we are going to accept it the way it is, or if we want to make any other changes.
I have some thoughts if you want me to share them. I mean, I think the work that the Planning Commission did, recognizing that there's a lot of different types of pools and trying to define them was really helpful, because I wouldn't have thought about it that way, but I think it's important to. For me, it's important that there's consistency. You know, if you say you need a 5-foot fence around a pool that's in ground, why wouldn't you need a 5-foot barrier of any kind of pool? So where I landed on this was 4 feet. If we're going to say that above-ground pools, walls of 4 feet are adequate, then I think the fence around an in-ground pool should be at a minimum 4 feet. It can be 5 if they want, or taller, but minimum of 4. And if a above-ground pool is less than 4 feet, then they can put the little 1-foot extension or whatever to make it 4 feet. And I think that I have no problem about a gate with a latch. I have a problem with a self-closing, self-latching gate, because I can tell you with 100% certainty, because I've had one, they are incompatible with uses, and you will prop it open. So I think if we said it must have a gate with a latch above the reach of a child, that would be reasonable, and forget the self-latching, self-closing part of it, because I think that that's just something that's, people are going to defeat it, and it then won't serve the purpose that we want it to. And then the last thing on page 33, where we talk about the definitions, I would just suggest one small change where it says in-ground swimming pool, a swimming pool with sidewalls which are not exposed and are entirely or primarily below the surrounding grade. I would get rid of the "or primarily," because in the next one where we say above ground, a swimming pool with any part of the sidewall exposed above the ground. Well, so now you've got an incompatible language. So I think if we say in-ground is entirely below the surface and above ground is any part above the surface, then that makes sense. But if you leave the primarily below, then you've got, then it's inconsistent with the definition below. So I would just make that one small change.
Okay, and just to clarify, on A, we're going to remove "or primarily."
Yeah.
On B, we would leave it the same
Correct.
because
Yep.
now it's consistent. Okay.
Yep. So my recommendation is that you say 4 feet for a fence, 4 feet for sidewalls, and gate around the fence with a latch high enough, a latch on the inside high enough that a child can't reach it.
Just for clarification, did you say for in-ground pools too, it would be 4 feet, or in-ground pools were 5 feet?
No, in-ground would be 4, because it's like if 4 feet is high enough to protect a child from a above-ground pool, why isn't a fence of 4 feet, non-climbable fence of 4 feet high enough to prevent them from crawling over and falling in a below-ground pool?
Yep.
And I put corrections on this so I can give that to you, Elizabeth, but
Okay.
I don't want to go through it page by page. That in just is where I landed.
Okay. Any other questions?
So is everybody all right with a 4-foot fence or 4-foot side walls?
Yep.
And not a self-latching gate, but
Yep.
a latch that is
a
above the
latch.
reach of a kid.
And on the inside
Plus
of
he
the
has monkey
fence.
arms. Get over the top.
Yeah, I mean, and Rob here, do you need to put anything in there that it needs to be latched when there's not people in or what?
Well, I think that I don't know,
People in attendance of the pool?
I don't remember if that's spelled out in here.
wanna leave that one
But I didn't have any other change, like I think the removable movable
The removable stairs.
ladders
we had
makes
that on.
sense, and when they're not using it, it should be taken off, and so I think that's good. And I only had one question. I don't know what I don't know what the difference is between an automatic cover and one, where it says in-ground pools shall be locking key operated. I think we decided that it could be either key operated or keypad, so I would strike the key operated.
And it should be a locking mechanism.
It should, yeah, just be locking. And then it says powered and automatic, not manual. But why does it have to be automatic? I mean, if they can close it and lock it manually, why isn't that okay?
I'm not sure. I've never had a pool.
Maybe there's no such
It's a
thing.
fancy cover, right, as much as the pool.
So I mean, I can go through this page by page if you want me to, but I didn't want to go into that much detail. Those would be my recommended changes.
Thank you.
And I agree. So I will make the motion. Let's see. Where am I here? So I move to, we're going to do a public hearing. Okay. So I move to call for public hearing on August 16th, 2023 for Chapter 7A ordinance amending swimming pool standards with the changes that Janet recommended and that you will give to Elizabeth to put into the record.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any more discussion? We'll call for the vote.
Rob, aye?
Janet, aye.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye?
And Jesse, aye.
And that's all, Mr. Mayor.
Wow, you did great on your first report. Congratulations.
It was a long meeting.
It was.
Thank you.
That was a tough one.
On to number 8, Coon Creek watershed vacancy.
Mr. Mayor and council members, could I know I had to step away, but just, did we adopt the ordinance or did we lay it over for 2 weeks? The design standards?
We laid it over.
We laid
Laid
it
it
over.
over, okay.
On one issue.
Just wanted to make sure.
Just one issue.
Okay.
It's all on you, Rob. You better come up with some really good examples
On what's that?
on the standing seam.
Oh, sure, yeah.
If you'll look in your packets on page 48, we have a letter, Matthew Herbst is terminating on the May 27, 2026, has resigned July 10th. So we're looking for anyone who would like to take his place. So you'll send out postcards to him, or?
I think the question to the council is, it appears that Coon Creek has a little turnover, and we've been sending historically the letters out, but it's a very short time period since we sent the last group out to this point. I don't know whether we ever got returned. So my question was, did you want to send it out again? You mean to the property owners in Coon Creek? That was my question to the council.
So normally I would always say yes, but in this case, because we did just send it out on another one and we didn't get any response, and it's a short turnaround, can we just post it on our website?
We certainly can. I think my only concern there would be properly informing people who are in Coon Creek. We don't want somebody in Rice Creek
I
or
see.
Sunrise applying, but I mean, that could just require sending them to the right documentation or sending them to GIS. So I think there's ways we could craft that and get that done tomorrow.
Did we not, I thought we got somebody who was interested in the last mailing. Am I remembering that wrong?
I don't think so.
For Coon Creek, I don't think
No?
we did.
Not for Coon Creek.
I think Rice
Okay.
Creek we did.
Okay.
So the question is it worth sending out another letter or postcard?
Yep.
This soon, after we just did it?
And it's because it's due next week.
I didn't hear.
It's due next week if they're interested, so I don't even think you can do this.
So I'd say skip it.
So just,
All right. Everybody agree?
but put it on the website?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe. Can we post it on the digital board out front too?
I don't see why not.
Okay, thank you.
All right, engineer report, Kevin.
Mr. Mayor, I have no report.
Attorney's report, Mr. Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I have 3 items. The first is really the work of others, so I'll just introduce it. This is the City of Columbus Code Enforcement Policy. In your packets or as part of your email, you have a summary of changes and the policy direction from Megan Rogers, who's worked on this policy. And you have a marked up ordinance, or I guess it's actually a policy, marked up policy for the code enforcement program. And with that, we can introduce our new employee, or we can take questions, or we can, whatever the council's.
I don't think we got
No,
enough.
I
We
was
never
gonna
got,
say,
we
Yeah,
never
I
got the
didn't
updated, it's not in our packet, and I.
Oh,
I
I'm
loo-
sorry, I did.
I looked for the email, I didn't see an email with it.
The additions went out today.
Today?
Was that the email we got this afternoon?
No,
was
the
just
email today
Is
was.
that this one, Jen?
No. Oh, it was on the back. I'm sorry, I didn't look far enough in that one. So it's on, it's with the updated Jake Steen thing.
Yeah, it's on the, yep, it's on page A6.
I mean, I can highlight changes because they're marked, but I don't know if you want time to look at it and have it come back at a later meeting, or what would you like, what's the council's preference?
Is it going to have an impact on what our employee is doing if we don't approve it today?
No.
Okay. Then I guess I would say I'd like,
Hold it over till next meeting?
yep.
Okay. Get a motion?
No motion needed.
No.
The other agenda item was scheduled for adoption, so that's why we had a specific motion to continue adoption on the commercial design standards.
Well,
Consist-
so is what we have here, are the revision marks correct? That's all that got changed? Because there aren't that many. We could look at it really quickly if.
Yeah, I mean, I can
Yep.
walk through the changes, and Megan's memo also identifies the changes, but when I just walk through, and others can assist me who've been in the discussion.
Because I don't recall that there was that many changes, so I think if there's just a few, we could just do it.
Is that the direction of the council?
Yep,
Okay.
the underlines are the changes.
Okay.
Yep. So if you've got the underscored policy, the first change on, nice to have numbered pages, but apologize for that. I guess it's the first page of the policy. Roman section 3, the city does not intend to utilize systemic inspections as part of its enforcement process. Adoption of a complaint-based process does not preclude the city from proactively inspecting final development conditions for land use permit approvals to ensure compliance with the permit conditions. So that's a clarification that I believe was discussed. In the next section, complaints may be provided via email, phone, or through the city's online complaint portal. Complainants may remain anonymous but will not receive updates on the investigation from city staff. On the next page, also underscored, number 3, multiple complaints. This is the priority of pursuing complaints. The council has established the following priorities. Number 3, multiple complaints received on the same property provided by named complainants. And then number 6, multiple complaints received on the same property provided by anonymous complainants. Hearing no questions, I believe we go now to section Roman 8. It's about 4 or 5 pages in. It starts with notice of violation for all levels of enforcement. the next changes on the next page, how sent, the written notice of violation shall be sent by,
Okay.
sent, it should be sent, not send, sent, there's a typo, by U.S. mail or provided via hand delivery to the property address and the taxpayer address of record within Anoka County. The second and third written notices of violation, if applicable, shall be sent via certified mail or provided via hand delivery to the address described herein. And I believe that is it. Those are the changes.
So has anyone got any issues with the changes?
Nope, now that you go through them, I do remember when we
Okay.
talked about it the other day, so it looks consistent with what I remember.
Okay? And we'll fix the typo.
So I would move to approve the Columbus Code Enforcement Policy as presented.
Do you have another change?
This is Sue, I'll second.
Red flag and so on.
Oh,
Yeah, Sean just mentioned that there was one other edit made about the city shall not use drones
Oh, right.
for enforcement.
Yep, I highlighted that in an orange, so I didn't see the blue. Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you.
So we have a motion on the floor, and it has been seconded. Any other questions or discussion?
who seconded it?
Me.
Oh, good, okay.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Sue, I.
Ron, aye.
And Jesse, aye.
Yay, you're official now. You have a policy.
All right, Mr. Mayor and Council, the next item is an update on the David Harjanko purchase agreement. This is what has been called Columbus Landing, or the landings at Columbus. I can't remember which way they have described it. As you know, there's been quite a long purchase agreement. Most recently, in, I believe it was May, the developer elected to extend the agreement by 90 days by having the $10,000 earnest money become non-refundable. And they've continued, according to the most recent update, to work with investors. They had a tour with investors from Chicago who looked at 3 sites, including Columbus and a couple closer in, more developed areas. The questions continue to come up. Let me just grab my notes here about opportunities to, well, some of the opportunities they're looking at is value engineering, which should be read reducing the value of and cost therein of the building materials and the like. Density reduction, which is interesting, considering downsizing the building to align with current equity pledges with the possibility of a second phase in the future. I read that to say that the investors don't want to overbuild and then not be able to fill the building. And then this is the one that I think is directed at us, the city, acquisition cost reduction, exploring possibilities for reducing fees and land costs. And I would just remind the council that we reduced the land cost in our negotiations twice. And this is now over, I don't know, 18 months ago, right, Elizabeth?
At least.
We pointed out that based on the ordinance at the time they were approved, there were no park fees required. I believe that's been changed in our policies. So a project that came in today would pay park fees on each unit. And then reduced assessment costs as to what was originally quoted. I think we were above $1.30 per square foot of land area, and it's below, well below $1 per square foot. In addition, there were public improvements that were installed at the public's expense, meaning we had grants. We really worked hard on getting those public improvements in. And so there's a fairly minimum assessment for those improvements. So the last time you had the opportunity to consider that question, you said no thank you. No thank you to adding more to the project. I'm going to assume your position has not changed unless you tell me otherwise or tell us otherwise. But more importantly, they've asked for a 90-day extension at no additional cost or a 1-year extension with a $10,000 deposit. So Our recommendation, Elizabeth and I have discussed this, would be that you, since you don't have anybody else knocking on our door for the site, and they continue apparently to work on financing, that perhaps another 90-day extension would be appropriate, especially given that the last one cost them $10,000. That's up to you. A one-year extension for $10,000 does not seem appropriate to tie up a site that's been tied up for already 18 to 24 months. So that's your staff recommendation, but it's up to you on any of those points, what direction you'd like to give us.
I just want to add that while they have special assessment costs, the only special assessment costs are the regional ponds or their stake part of the ponds and the utility extensions. They were not assessed for the traffic light or the road improvement because we got grant funds, which is a big plus for a development overall, because they will not have that expense.
And Mr. Mayor and Council, I would add one more thing, because I'm working on 2 or 3 other projects in the Twin Cities area that these concerns about financing are real. I think the Fed raised the interest rate another quarter point. Hopefully they're going to pause here pretty soon. But there will be a change in the financing climate, from the folks I'm talking to, when the increases, when the costs come down and the increases in interest rates pause or stop, there will be a new level for financing projects like this. And so this is a good site. It's got good visibility for all the reasons we've discussed, kind of a very reasonable land cost, very reasonable infrastructure cost. I believe this site will be developed, if not by this developer and not this year, certainly soon enough. So just giving you that feedback from other projects I'm working on, I don't think they're not telling us stories that we don't know. There's certainly, it's difficult to finance right now, but that's going to change here in the coming months and years.
Yeah, and I guess I just echo what you're saying, Bill, talking to investors and helping projects go on a daily basis. I'm hearing that investors are shying far away from market rate and moving to affordable and or subsidized where they can get tax increment funding. So I honestly, personally don't see them getting the funding in 3 months, but much less a year. But
Mr. Mayor, council member, I'm glad you raised that, because a subsequent email said, one of the lenders said, we're doing projects with tax increment financing. Well, to do that in this case, you would have to have an affordable housing project. You'd have to set aside at least 20% at 60% of the median income. And so that's a different project, and that's a whole nother process. So to me, that's almost like a do-over, because now you're changing the type of project and all the considerations that went into it. So unless you tell us otherwise, we're not going to put any more subsidy on the table. But then the question becomes, do you want to give them a no-cost 90-day extension to keep them out in the marketplace looking for financing?
There's one other item that I think you also have to look at. They were their conditional use permit, PUD, was approved last June. They didn't get their Rice Creek approval until September. Generally, with those types of permits, they're good for 1 year, and then they go into a probationary period for 6 months. The council can grant the 6-month extension for that probationary period. It's for projects that just can't get off the ground in the first year, whether it's weather or circumstances, but you allow that latitude. They're in that latitude right now because we're past June. I realized they couldn't get their Rice Creek permit till September. So if you count their 1-year period to September, it might coincide with the 90 days, but the way I figure the 90 days, it's November. So with that motion, you would decide whether you're going to count the 1 year from June, which was our approval, or the September when they actually got approval from Rice Creek, and whether or not you'll grant them that extra 6 months, which is a probationary period. So it's 18 months total for them to establish their project.
Did I hear you say, Bill, that they've already paid $10,000 on the last extension? I thought the last extension we granted was it was within the, they didn't, the earnest money wasn't at risk.
It was at risk. What they didn't do is we didn't do another amendment
Yeah.
because they used the provision in the contract that said, if you want a 90-day extension, you can send us notice, and then the earnest money, which is already at the title company, becomes non-refundable. So essentially, they paid $10,000. That money is now ours. In fact, we would probably request it from the title company since
Okay.
it's non-refundable.
So I had a question. So at this point with that property in a temporary purchase agreement, right? There's no other developers that are able to look at that, right? Is it being shown as sold at this point, or is it being showed as still available but pending?
It's, I would say available pending. I haven't got any phone calls on the property.
Okay.
But if someone were, you need to call, I would still tell them it's pending. So I would keep them, on file in case it didn't go through, and then I would contact them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the way we view it is, they have the property tied up under a purchase agreement, but it doesn't mean we can't talk to anybody. We're not under an NDA, for instance, non-discussion or non-disclosure. Yep.
So I think we have not much to lose by giving them the extra 3 months, correct? Until November. They're the most interested, they've done the most work. I think you've probably been pretty clear to them what we're not giving away and what we were willing to negotiate with. So I think we should do it. But then what was the question on the Race Creek thing again?
So we issued the conditional use permit for PUD in June of last year.
Yeah,
They didn't get their Rice Creek permit till September of last year. Our code says that you have 1 year to implement or start work on your conditional use permit.
yeah.
Well, they haven't started anything yet. They haven't even purchased the property. So there's a contingent that gives you an extra 6 months. You know what I mean? That says, if it takes 18 months to establish, we'll allow that, but the council has to recognize that that's where we're at. My question to you is, would you start the one year when they got their Rice Creek permit in September? Or do you think it should be in June, because that makes a difference? But regardless of whether you say June or September, we're extending the purchase agreement to November, which is outside that boundary. So at this point, if you're going to extend the 18 months, then it would either be till December, for them to establish, meaning purchasing the property and starting construction. But either way, we have to do something, because otherwise the conditional use permit's going to expire and they will have to go through the process again.
And we're going to do that if we decide to grant their extension till November 2nd. So if we vote to move it or to extend it, at the same time, we should vote to extend
Their conditional use
the
permit,
time, until they have to start building.
18 months, and then should we date it September or June?
Right?
Right,
Is the extra 6 months starting in June, which would be December, or it's September and then it ends in March, or whatever 6 months from that is? They claim that they don't feel like their permit was, until September, they felt like they didn't have their entire permit.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I have a suggestion and a position. The suggestion is that you deal with the request for the 90-day extension, and then separately discuss and address the extension of their approvals. It's the PUD approval that expires, and I think regardless of when they get the Rice Creek permit, you're extending your approvals. You don't have authority to extend, other approvals. So my recommendation would be that you give them a 6-month extension from June to the end of the year. That gets them out to the other side of their 90 days for financing, put together a project. They can come back if they have good reason, extenuating circumstances, to seek a further extension. So June to December for the CUP, PUD approvals, and then 90 days if you like on the purchase agreement.
Okay, that
I
makes
think
sense.
I think we don't want to get trapped in future projects that it's timed out on some other agency's approvals. It's timed based upon your action as a council.
So Rob, here, question on that then. If in fact another developer by, a miracle comes in and they're like, yeah, we want to buy that, we're funded, we're good to go, does that stop that developer from purchasing that property if we set up a separate purchase agreement with them?
Mr. Mayor and Council, no, it does not. We would have to, after 90 days, if they're not ready to move forward, we would have to terminate the purchase agreement. And they have some period of time after the 90 days to close. I think it's 30 days. So they have 90 days to get their contingencies waived or addressed, and then they have 30 days to close. So that's why taking everything to the end of the year kind of lines up, and then their approvals expire, the purchase agreement expires, and as you probably know, most builders of apartments want to start in the spring. As soon as road conditions are lifted, they want to get going because they want the whole construction season to pour the foundation and close the building. It's unlikely that anybody's going to start in January.
Yeah, they're not going to want to throw 50 grand on for heat and cover and.
Right. Now, on the other hand, they could pull building permits, and that's usually, if they spend the money to pull building permits, then you can consider the project going, because that's a pretty significant expense to have, construction level drawings and pull building permits.
All right, so I'll make the motion to approve the purchase agreement extension contingency period for another 90 days to expire on November 2nd, 2023. Is there a second?
This is Sue, I'll second.
Is there any more questions or?
I have one more question. So, Bill, you mentioned some of their other asks. Approving this extension does not approve any of those.
Correct.
Okay.
Anything else, anyone?
Thanks
I'll
for
call
asking
for the
that.
vote.
Rob, aye?
Janet, I.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
And Jesse, aye. Okay, and now our next motion is to,
Extend the CUP, PUD approvals to,
until December.
No.
but is there a date? What was the date that was
I want
approved?
to say it was June, I want to say it was June 8th, so it was,
Why don't you give them till the end of December, just for maximum flexibility on getting to a closing, December 31.
So I'll make the motion to extend their PUD, CUP until the 31st of December, 2023. Is there a second?
This is Sue, I'll second.
So it's moved and seconded. Any other questions on that issue or discussion?
No? Rob, aye?
Janet, I.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
And Jesse, aye. Anything else, Bill?
One other item, I was asked to just give a brief discussion or position on the cannabis law and whether the city can adopt an ordinance banning it from public places. The short answer is yes, you can. We've looked at league materials, looked at a model ordinance, and you can. And so the parks, for instance, these grounds, we can define public places. You can't ban it from people's homes and yards and all of that. And we can, what I'd like to do, since it's a pretty involved law and there's some options for the city to consider, is just bring back a discussion at a future workshop. We can bring that ordinance forward, since it's an August 1st start date. We can bring just that piece of the ordinance forward so you can ban it from public places soon. And we'll work on that if that's the direction of the council. And then have a fuller discussion about registration. And, there's a process by which, so the license is issued by the state for a cannabis business, but there has to be at least one per 12,500 people. So you'd have to have perhaps one licensed cannabis business in your community under the registration program. You would have to elect to, and now I'm getting into the details, but you would have to elect to follow that registration process. Otherwise, it could just be wide open. So I think it's going to take some time for these licensing, the licensing system to be established. So we've got some time there, but I understood that there was at least some interest in banning it in public places. So if that's the direction of the council, we'll come back very soon with that ordinance.
Bill, is that a public nuisance ordinance, or is that a Chapter 7A zoning ordinance?
It would be a nuisance ordinance, so we wouldn't have to go to a public hearing at the Planning Commission unless you tell us to go there. So it's really more on the administrative code. There are options to have land use regulations. There's options to follow the state registration program. There's a whole process whereby if somebody seeks a license, the state office is supposed to consult the local authorities, but you can't flat out ban the use. You can regulate where, call them head shops are located, that sort of thing. Retail, I should call them retail shops.
You're showing your age.
A little vernacular. But all of that's a discussion, I think, for another night. I just understood that there was a request on this one topic of a public ban and for smoking.
I have a question. So as I heard this discussed on NPR the other day, and there was somebody from the league on there, it sounded like, and this is only about the public use of it, not all the other licensing stuff. It sounded like some cities had, as part of their Clean Air Act, also, like I know at the U, you couldn't smoke outside either. You couldn't smoke inside, you couldn't smoke outside on the grounds. And so in those cases, they would amend the ordinance that deals with the outdoor smoking of tobacco products to include cannabis. I'm assuming we don't have that here. But they also brought up that while you're at it, you might want to think about vaping. You might want to think about, if you don't have an ordinance that bans smoking tobacco in public places, you might want to think about that. So I'm just throwing that out there because I hadn't thought about any of those things. And it's like, well, yeah, it's probably be good to have that on the radar screen. So I'm just throwing that out there as you decide what you want to bring back to us.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Mayor and Council, Councilmember Hegland's correct. There are two legal provisions in statute. The newly enacted law on cannabis allows you to ban it in public places by local ordinance. In addition, the Clean Air Act in the state allows local authorities to ban smoking in public and in public places. So you've got those two laws. You can draft an ordinance that addresses both, or you can just deal with the cannabis issue and then decide whether you want to add smoking, vaping, and the like.
I did check the park ordinance, and the park ordinance does not say you can't smoke in the park.
So I think that's a question whether or not you want Bill to come back with something that is only specific to cannabis, or whether you want to take on those other uses at the same time.
I think just cannabis at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say
There
that
hasn't been an
too.
overrun of people smoking cigarettes, is there?
And that hasn't been a problem. I mean, to not have that in our ordinance today, the not smoking at the park. I feel bad
You
for
should
the
ask the guy who
smokers.
uses the park every day what he thinks about that.
The park is the only place left you can smoke.
Well,
I feel bad for the smokers.
I think I've seen one cigarette butt in that park, but that could be because of Vic.
That's because Vic picks them all up.
Yeah, but I've never seen anybody smoke out there.
I think the only reason to consider that is the nuisance to other people who are sensitive to smoke. If they're all walking on the path and you're in somebody's plume, I can see why that might be a problem, but if we haven't
But you
heard
are
com-
outside and that plume goes by really fast.
I'm just saying that's why other cities have banned outdoor smoking anywhere. I'm not saying we should, I'm just suggesting that if we want to consider it, we should, and we should make a decision, yes or no, on any of those uses, including vaping.
Well, I think we should move on the pot in the park. Oh, that would be a good, forget fun in the park.
Token
Can
in
I
the
have a
park.
fundraiser?
Pot in the park, Club Us. Does everybody agree with that?
We do that in the fall festival. yeah.
Yep.
All right.
We'll get rave reviews, there's
You
guaranteed.
could adopt the ordinance the day after Fall Fest and give it a go. All right.
Think of the munchies we'd sell. Go ahead.
I think the consensus looks like, yes, come back with that ordinance. And keep in mind that when we bring back the ordinance, it's the starting point. You can comment on it again. You can decide on the question that Councilmember Haglund raised. So, and then when we have the fuller discussion on cannabis, you can come back to some of these other issues, regulatory issues.
Do we have can you not drink alcohol in the park?
That is true.
I was just curious if we were going to be able to drink but can't smoke.
No, it's
be terrible.
prohibited, because we're going to have to address that for Fall Fest, since this is considered part of the park, and we're going to have a beer garden.
Okay.
Here's a quick question to you, Bill. Not to, so I'm having a big party at my house, and some of the smokers, and it all drifts over to the neighbor's house. Is that a nuisance?
It could be classified as a nuisance, but it would have to be, continuous, as Councilmember Wagaman said. If it blows away, it can't really be a nuisance unless it's like in their face. I mean, certainly some people think, with sensitivity, think that's a nuisance. We've never had that complaint that I know of.
The complaint that I've gotten is when they're burning garbage. And if they're burning garbage, it smells, and they will complain. The other complaint I've gotten is many people in Columbus have wood-burning stoves, wood-burning furnaces. And when the wind blows the wrong way, and if you have your windows open and the smoke goes in it, I will get complaints. I don't know why people have their windows open in the winter, but there are some people who have their windows open in the winter. And we've had, those are the two, but it's a smoke, burning smoke issue.
I just wondered because
I prefer that.
I've just heard through rumor that cannabis smells, hangs around the area.
Is that an attraction or a deterrent?
I mean, once it's in the air, it's in the air,
Not that you would know, right? Just what you've heard?
I just heard from a reliable source.
Anything else, Bill?
I think that's it, unless council members have anything for me.
Anybody have any other questions? Nope. All right, then, let's move on to Mayor and City Council's members' report. Rob?
No report, Mayor.
Janet?
I have two quick things. One is on behalf of the Personnel Committee. We have a resignation to accept from Frank Conan, effective July 20th, 2023. So I make that motion.
This is Sue, I'll second.
It's moved and seconded. Are there any other questions or discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Rob, aye.
Janet, aye.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye?
And Jesse, aye.
And then the second thing is just an FYI. So in the ongoing saga of the Sunrise River WMO and Ham Lake, we do have a meeting set up on Wednesday, August 2nd, next week at 2:30 at the East Bethel City Hall to meet with them, all members of the JPA, Bowser, Anoka County, and all their attorney friends, to try to move this off the dime once again. If any of you are sitting around on Wednesday afternoon with nothing to do, you are more than welcome to attend. 2:30.
That all?
Nope.
I have nothing. Sue?
I have nothing.
Ron?
I have nothing, but do we have a joint meeting coming up?
The joint meeting is on August 2nd, and that will be at the Planning Commission, and at 6 o'clock, and we'll be discussing the residential zone business ordinance.
Okay, well, I won't be able to make that, so.
Okay.
It's this coming Wednesday, correct?
yeah,
It's already August. Yeah.
Hopefully my meeting in East Bethel will be done.
Public
by
Works?
the time.
Mr. Mayor and Council, a couple of meetings back, we talked about vehicles parking on Hornsby Street. I did as you asked and went and talked to Love's Travel Plaza, if they would go out and talk to any, or if they have talked to any truckers on the road, and their statement back to me was it's not their property, so they don't, you know, they don't deal with that. So again, I'm back to talk about no parking on Hornsby Street. That has to be adopted by resolution, and Eleanor wrote a fantastic resolution. There is also a map. The resolution starts on page 52 of your agenda. There's a map on page 53 and 54, just two different maps, but those are the approximate locations of where I would want to put no parking signs. And I guess I'm going to leave it up to discussion.
So Jim, this would include parking of any kind of vehicle, not just trucks, correct?
Correct. No parking, period.
And do we have this restriction on any of our other streets where cars can't park on both sides?
So there are other roadways that people park on certain times of the year. I don't remember exactly what I'm going to call it, the snowplow ordinance has a no parking on city streets from, I'm going to say October to April or something, but I don't remember exactly what that is. I believe the other parking ordinance is you can't park for more than 4 hours in any particular street that's not posted as no parking. But this is just a issue that I've had complaints on in this area. So not to just say that I'm picking on Hornsby Street, but I did look at Hornsby Street North and then, you know, Ever Street, and, you know, there's really no place to park on those. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm just picking on one business or one area, but this is an issue here. So.
Yeah, and to your point, I know I noted last time that I'd talked to a business right there, and they said that nothing really has changed as far as vehicles parking on that road, and they say they are extending down past Love, so like where you got it posted, that's a good idea.
And it's my intent to basically post from 97 all the way to 145th, so just no parking, period.
I'm fine with that.
So I do have a question. When we talked about it the other night, you also saw cars parked in that cul-de-sac by Holiday?
That is posted as no parking.
Oh, that's already posted? Okay, all
I've
right.
been seeing people there a lot lately now that you mentioned that.
So there used to be trucks parked there a fair amount, so the semi-trucks would park there because Holiday has, I don't know, 4 or 5 spots. And that would fill up relatively quick, and it seems like the people that like Holiday go to Holiday and everybody else goes to Love, so, you know, I don't know if it's how their gas cards work or what, but that was their overflow was in that turnaround, and it's just problematic for us for plowing. But, you know, other people, then they would have to turn around in a business parking lot versus the turnaround in the public right of way, so.
So Jim, I was over there one morning and I noticed that, have you been noticing a lot of trash on Hornsby there? I mean, like drivers throwing junk in the ditch?
I mean, we've picked up some tires over there. That's really all that I've seen. You know, I'm sure there has been some, you know, garbage blowing out of trash cans or something like that from the gas station, but it's somewhat similar by other businesses too that have that outdoor garbage stuff too, so.
Well, I really want to point to the truck drivers that are doing it, that are parking there. That's, I mean, I happened to notice how backed up it was there about 5:30 in the morning, man.
It's busy,
It is, it is. They all want to get through the cities before.
yeah.
So what is the resolution number? 23,
This will be number 9.
2309.
Can I ask one other question?
Sure.
So I don't disagree with this at all. I'm just more curious. So in our whereas, when we are saying, you know, one of the reasons for this is that when vehicular parking is permitted on both sides of the road due to narrow width, blah, blah, blah. To me, it feels like then you're talking about more than just the Hornsby Street I mean, you're using that as a reason why you don't want it here, but I got to believe that this would be a problem on many streets. So my question is, do we want to use that as a reason? I mean, I think your first one that says that we can deny parking along any roads if it's in the public interest is probably a good enough reason to say this without, I don't know what it just seems like when you give a reason like that, that then you're opening up, well, then why didn't you put this restriction on, pick another road, that parking on both sides would make it hard for emergency vehicles or pedestrians or whatever. So I'm just curious if that's a problem, or if that is, since
one
the
of the
first
reasons-
whereas really gives us the authority to do it anywhere we want, for no other reason than that we get to because we think it's in the public interest.
So Hornsby Street is a 55-mile-an-hour road, which makes it a hazard in general. Because if, as a hypothetical, a truck parks there and the truck driver jumps out of his truck, cars drive 55 on that road, that's a hazard in itself right there. So, I mean, we just kind of talked about, here's all of the reasons. Hypothetically, we don't need to list them all. We can just say that it's a public hazard.
It's more a question for Bill. And I'm, like I said, I'm in favor of it. I'm not arguing that we shouldn't do it.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I think the important point is that we are responding as a city to a problem. So, because if someone said, well, why didn't you post this all over the city? Because we don't have a problem all over the city. We have a problem here based, so I think it'd be important to note in here that it's in response to a problem. So we have a rational basis for picking on this street and not another street.
So does that require an amending this?
Yeah, and I can take a real
Okay.
quick,
Thanks.
I can add a couple words.
Some lawyer speak.
All right, and whereas since the opening of the Love's Travel Center, the city has experienced numerous, I don't know if they're complaints, numerous instances,
Or reports?
reports, there we go, instances or reports of truck parking, and I would identify truck parking because that's what you're trying to address.
Correct.
Truck parking on Hornsby Street Northeast. That's it. So that whereas so we're responding to a specific concern or complaint. Didn't do a great job with that, but you get the idea.
I'm sure you can, yeah.
All right with that?
So then I would move to approve Resolution 2309, posting no parking signs on Hornsby Street South as indicated in Exhibit A and as amended by our attorney, Mr. Griffith.
Rob, I'll second.
Any other questions or debate?
There's a more of a comment on it too. It's going to preserve our shoulders of our road over a longer period with them trucks not dipping off the road, eroding the asphalt. So that's all. Rob, aye.
Call the vote.
Janet, aye.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
Jesse, aye.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Public Communications Coordinator report.
No report from me this evening, Mr. Mayor.
City Administrator's report.
I have one item on my report, Mr. Mayor and council members, and I was notified last week of updating our tobacco ordinance. We took over tobacco licensing this past year, and Anoka County did not have the same calendar as ours, so their tobacco licenses expired in August, and our ordinance indicated that our license was from January through December. And we talked with our attorney, Megan Rajes, and said, we didn't really think it was fair to require the businesses to apply for a 4-month permit, only to turn around in January to reapply. And so she amended the ordinance to include application requirements and the extension of Anoka County's license to match our calendar. Well, in the ordinance, or in the regulations, it says that we would put the business owners on notice that we were changing the ordinance. And at that time, I realized we were a couple of days short of that 30-day notice. So when we sent out the letters, we had indicated that you were going to have a special meeting on that Friday because that would give them the 30 days. And in the meantime, I talked to Megan, and she said, well, you know, we have some latitude, but the letters already went out to all of the business owners indicating that we would have a special meeting on Friday at 9 a.m. to talk about the ordinance amendments. They're very short, again, they're application requirements and giving us authority to have the extension of the 4 months. So Lori and I talked about it. We thought we would keep with the schedule since the letters went out and informed them of that. And so the motion here is to call for a public hearing for the tobacco ordinance on August 25th at 9 a.m. And I would need a motion to do that.
You made the motion. Can you make a motion?
I can't make a motion.
I
can do
make
it.
them.
I can do it.
Okay.
So Rob, I move to call for a special meeting on August 25th, 2023 at 9 a.m. for a final vote on tobacco ordinance amendments.
And this is Sue, I'll second.
I'll call for the vote.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
Jesse, aye.
Mr. Mayor and Council members, I have nothing further.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
One item that I probably should have asked for a motion on the Harchenko purchase agreement, giving staff authority to negotiate and get executed the extension. Usually you've given us that authority, but that should be by motion.
And that's within the guidelines we spoke of today.
Yes.
Okay.
So is there a second?
Well, he can't make a motion.
What?
I think, I don't know if Councilmember Bush was making that motion.
Sure. Motion.
I'll second.
Okay.
I'll call for the vote.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
Jesse, aye.
Thank you.
And that was it, Elizabeth?
I'm sorry?
You have anything more?
I do not have anything further.
All right. Then we're quickly on to announcements and reminders. Joint meeting, pardon the pun, August 2nd. City Council workshop, August 8th. City Council meeting, August 9th. And the calendar's on the back. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Rob, second.
I'll call for the vote.
Rob, aye.
Janet, I.
Sue, aye.
Ron, aye.
And Jesse, aye. Our meeting is adjourned for this evening. Thank you, everyone.